Hello fellow climbers, my name is Gergő and I'm an amateur climber from Hungary. Today I would like to talk to you about how this year I managed to progress in climbing from climbing 6B plus to 7B in less than 5 months. In my last episode I talked about how I climbed my first influential 6B plus project that was really hard for me, and how it helped me to improve in climbing. But the story doesn't end there. It actually starts here, because from that point I managed to break my plateau finally and climb a few new grades. This sudden improvement was due to various factors, in my opinion. This will be a 2-video series. In this video, the first part, I'm going to talk about the actual story and the routes that I have climbed during these 5 months. In the second one, I will be describing what I think actually caused this sudden spike in my performance, and will divide these changes into 3 different categories: my mentality, my projecting tactics, and finally my training and technique. But first, let's talk about my story of the last 5 months. In 2021, my goal was the next year, after I healed that initial finger injury that I have talked about in my last video, to actually go outside and climb as much as possible on the rock and enjoy the process. It was really important. 7B that time was only in the back of my mind, because some of my friends who were just slightly stronger than me and more experienced could climb a few routes in that grade, and I felt that I am not too far off from them, but at time when I climbed on rock it felt pretty distant for me. So from that point I was determined to go rock climbing pretty regularly. It was my first goal. I managed to do it and go quite a few times, and quite a lot more than ever before, and it helped me tremendously. When I went to climb, I usually worked on a project. My first goal was to climb the route that is next to Ypszilon, that was the 6B plus I mentioned before. This climb next to it, it's a 7A called Aranyeső. In this crag called Francia-bánya, there are really few routes, and there was no grade between 6B plus and 7A, so I thought that I should just try it out. And it turned out that the 6B plus was so sandbagged that the 7A was not that much harder at all. So it's also a very short bouldery route with the crux at the end. It took me a few days to figure it out, because there is a pretty hard clipping position at the last quick draw, and also from that point there comes a few harder moves. That is a 7A crux at the end of this route. It was also hard because I had 0 endurance, so when I had to do the last hard moves at the end, I was sometimes pretty pumped. But after I figured out these last few hard moves, I was able to complete it just a few weeks after I've done Ypsilon, and I think it only took me 3 or 4 sessions to complete this 7A. After I climbed my first 7A, the next level actually in my home crag was a 7B right next to the 7A. It's called Bakafing. It has the same ending as the 7A I did before. The first section, it actually ignores that really good crack with big holes in the beginning of the route, and it goes directly in the middle, and it has smaller holes, bigger moves, and just much harder in general than the 7A, and it would require some serious efforts. In the end of May, I went on a 3-day climbing trip to Kotechnik, Slovenia. There is a famous route there called Sveta Eva. It's a soft 7A plus with pretty good holds, but it has poor feet, polished rock, and pretty hard body positions in my opinion. We were there 3 days, and I started projecting Sveta Eva on my second day. I tried it during the whole first day, trying to figure out the moves, and I've also done a few red point tries. I've done this same thing on the third day as well, trying to perfect beta and trying to find solutions that were better for me. I just couldn't do it, and somehow when I knew that I will not come back here anytime soon, I know I had to step up my game. With the last bit of power and my last bit of skin, my skin hurt like crazy the whole day, and sometimes I just couldn't hold on because it was too painful. So with my last bit of power, totally hopeless, I went for a last try after my 3 last tries, and only with a few hours to spare before we had to leave, I managed to stick it somehow, and I was really happy about that. It was really important for me because I knew it was the last steps between me and 7B that I already wanted that time, and I really experienced this feeling when you have to give it your all and try your hardest and just don't give up. After Kotechnik in the summer, I was climbing a little bit less. I haven't always got the partners, and I also had the other programs. But I started projecting Bakafing, that 7B. It actually was that hard that I thought, and it seemed like the next step for me. That particular crux move was very hard. It was the hardest move that I've ever tried. I only managed to do it a few times in isolation. But in this process, I had to climb that 7A I was working on before, and that has the same ending as Bakafing, because I was trying Bakafing on top rope. And this is why the 7A crux at the end of the route was so dialed, it just felt like a breeze every time I did it. In the summer I was working on some other routes in the crags. I climbed the hard 6C, I've also flashed a very soft 7A in different crags, but my 7B project was still waiting for my ascent. In August, I went to Hungary's biggest climbing destination, Kisgerecse, for the first time, where most of the hard climbing can be found in the country. Me and my friend started working on a new route called Heffalump, which is a 7A plus / 7B route. People are arguing about that on 8a.nu. It was a very interesting route with very unique features. It had so many side pulls and slopey crimps and slopey holds that I have never seen before. After just one session on Heffalump, I managed to do all the moves, and it felt actually pretty easy. There was 1 or 2 harder moves, but I couldn't do it at the end of the day because I was too tired. In September, one of my climbing friends, who I haven't seen in a long time, came back to Hungary and said that he had free time to climb. And luckily I had time as well, so we were able to go rock climbing together for 2 weeks, multiple times. That was, I think, the first time I've ever did that. At first, we returned to Kisgerecse, and there I managed to climb Heffalump on my first try, just as I was hoping for. On the same day, I also tried another 7A plus, an overhanging longer route that was not my style, and I was very pumped. I missed the endurance needed for that route. I figured out all the moves, and I knew I had to do it sometime soon. A few days later, we returned to Kisgerecse. I was trying another 7A plus, a very famous route called Portland. It's a vertical, crimpy route with some technical movements. I managed to do all the moves in this one session as well, but I just couldn't do the sand at the end of the day. I was too tired this time again, but I knew that next time it should go as well. But sadly, I just couldn't go back there since then, and I'm still hoping to do these 2 climbs. But next week, with the same partner, we visited Róka-hegy, which is also one of the famous and the biggest climbing crags in Budapest, Hungary. There are tons of routes. I had a really particular route in mind there. It's a 7B called Yoda, my other 7B contender. To my surprise, I managed to do all the single moves. At the end of the day, I also tried red point go. It was really close. I just missed a few percent of power. It felt hard, but I had the confidence that if I fully recover and come back, I should be able to climb it. Another few days has passed, and returned to try Bakafing to Francia-bánya, my home crag. I already perfected the crux move on previous occasions, but it was still a gamble. It is a very low percentage dead point move to a bit slopey half pad crimp. I can only do this move if I flex every muscle and try to move as slowly as possible and be as precise as possible with landing with my right hand and also pulling really hard with the left. It is probably the hardest move I have ever done. It requires my full attention or I just miss the chance every time. To my relief, after only a few failed tries, I was finally able to complete that move starting from the ground, and I knew I should not miss this chance. I did a few hard moves after the crux move. It has 7-8 crux at the end, but I knew that part really very well, and I managed to fly past the ending without even resting in the middle jog. This was the story of completing this short power endurance climb, my first 7B. To sum it up, I climbed my first hard 6B plus on the 26th of April, and I managed to climb my first 7B on the 10th of September, which is basically less than 5 months. I was so happy and for the first time pretty proud of myself, which is a rare thing. By the way, a few days later we actually went back to try Yoda on Róka-hegy, and I have managed to meet my expectations again, as I was able to tick this one off on my first red point try that day. I was just over the moon again. I knew if I could do 2 7Bs in 1 week of time with just a few sessions, I'm still capable of much more. I thought that I probably could do 7C next year. I could do it if I put in some time and training. I knew that the most important thing missing for me to progress even harder in sport climbing is my basic endurance and some finger strength. I really want to work on that on this winter. Thank you very much for watching. This was my story about my progression to 7B, and please watch my next video when I'm going to describe all the details of what I did and what changed my climbing in these 5 months and what helped me to progress to reach this grade. We are going to talk about 3 main things that helped me to progress: mentality, projecting tactics, and finally training that I did and the climbing technique that may have improved. Thank you for watching. Please check out my other videos as well. See you soon.